Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unravel a massive historical mystery behind literally one of the most famous and beloved stories in the entire world. When you think about the tale of Aladdin, you probably picture flying carpets, a wisecracking genie, and this sweeping magical Arabian city, right? Well, what if I told you that almost everything we think we know about the origins of this story is actually a total myth? Seriously. Today we're looking at the real history, the actual people involved, and a long-lost manuscript that completely turned our understanding of literature upside down.
So what if I told you that Aladdin was never actually in the Arabian Nights? I know, it instantly shatters a huge assumption. We basically all associate Aladdin with that legendary collection of Middle Eastern folktales, the 1001 Nights. But here is a genuinely shocking historical fact. The story of Aladdin has absolutely no authentic Arabic textual source in the original collection, none. If you go back and look at the earliest medieval Arabic manuscripts of the 1001 Nights, Aladdin simply isn't there. He doesn't exist. So, how on earth did he become its most famous character?
To answer that, we've got to talk about a concept literary scholars call the orphan tales. These are iconic, globally recognized stories. We're talking Aladdin, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, even Sinbad the Sailor, that were just suddenly added to the Arabian Nights in the early 18th century. But get this, they were added without any known original Arabic manuscript to actually back them up. For centuries, these orphan tales completely baffled historians. It was like this giant historical detective story with a massive missing puzzle piece. Where did these incredibly rich, highly detailed stories actually come from if they weren't in the original text?
Let's move to and see how this builds. Picture this. It's early 1700s Paris. A French scholar and translator named Antoine Galland started translating the original medieval Arabic manuscript of the 1001 Nights into French back in 1704. And it was a smash hit. I mean, the European public was completely obsessed. But by 1709, Galland hit a major wall. He literally ran out of source material. His publisher was breathing down his neck, demanding more. The public was hungry for more of this magic, but the original manuscript was done, finished. Galland was desperate. He needed an absolute miracle to meet his looming deadlines.
Section 1. The French translator and the Syrian storyteller. So that miracle I mentioned, it arrived on May 5th, 1709, in the form of a totally chance meeting that would literally change world literature forever. In a quiet room in Paris, completely shielded from the noise of the city, the 60-something Antoine Galland sat down with a 20-year-old traveler. This young guy's name was Hana Diab. He was a Maronite Christian who had traveled all the way from Aleppo, Syria, a city famous for its vibrant coffeehouse culture and professional storytellers. Over the course of several weeks, this young Syrian sat with the aging French librarian and just started telling him stories.
But you know it's incredibly unfair? How history actually recorded this whole thing. For centuries, Antoine Galland was credited as the sole brilliant genius who essentially invented Aladdin from scratch to satisfy his Western readers. Meanwhile, Diab was barely an unsung footnote. I mean, he was mentioned only briefly in Galland's private diary. For a long time, some scholars even doubted Diab was a real person. And get this, when ancient Arabic manuscripts of Aladdin were mysteriously found in Paris years later, linguistic experts eventually proved they were complete fakes. They were just back translations. Someone had literally translated Galland's French text back into Arabic. It seemed like Diab's voice was completely, permanently lost to history. But then, an absolute breakthrough. Fast forward with me to 1993. A linguist named Jerome Lenton was digging through the vast, labyrinth-like archives of the Vatican Library in Rome. And there, hidden away and totally miscatalogued because its title pages have been ripped off, he found a travel memoir. And it wasn't just any old diary. It was the handwritten personal autobiography of Hana Diab himself. Literally, after 250 years in the shadows, the true author of the Aladdin narrative finally had a voice again.
And this brilliantly illustrates how modern scholars are totally rethinking this narrative today. As the translator and scholar Yasmin Seal points out, we no longer have to view Aladdin as just some purely European Orientalist fantasy made up by Galland, but it's also not an ancient, untraceable Arabic myth either. Instead, it's a deeply blended Franco-Arab collaboration. It is the direct product of two vastly different men, from two completely different cultures, sitting in a room together and weaving a narrative out of their shared imaginations.
Section 2. Mirrors of Versailles, Life versus Art. So where did Diab actually get the inspiration for Aladdin? Well, when scholars finally translated that long-lost memoir, they noticed these striking, absolutely unmistakable parallels between Diab's real-life experiences as a young traveler in Europe and the fictional magical world of Aladdin. Diab wasn't just reciting old folktales he heard back in Aleppo, he was actively processing his own crazy life experiences through this lens of fantasy.
Just compare Diab's harsh reality with Aladdin's magical fantasy. In real life, young Hannah Diab traveled to Paris working for a French antiquary named Paul Lucas. And Lucas was this manipulative, incredibly difficult paymaster who basically used Diab for his own gain. Now look at the story of Aladdin. What do we see? We see a deceptive sorcerer from the Maghreb who poses as Aladdin's uncle, totally tricking this impoverished young boy into risking his life to grab a magical lamp. Diab literally translated his subservient, highly frustrating relationship with his real-life boss directly into the primary villain of his greatest tale. How cool is that?
And the parallels just keep going. Take the sheer awe of Versailles. When Diab first arrived in France, he was brought before King Louis XIV at the staggeringly huge Palace of Versailles. As a poor young guy from Syria, he was completely overwhelmed and bedazzled by that level of opulent wealth. So he projected that exact feeling of awe directly into Aladdin's reaction to the Sultan's magnificent palace. Even the Cave of Wonders has a real-world origin. In his memoir, Diab remembers a time back in Syria when his boss, Paul Lucas, ordered a local goat herd to climb down into an ancient tomb cave, and the boy emerged carrying an old ring and a lamp. Diab literally took the mundane events of his own life and spun them into absolute literary gold.
Section 3. The original folktale versus modern pop culture. Now this brings us to a pretty stark realization. The story Diab and Galland created together in that room in Paris is wildly different from the highly westernized, supposedly Arabian adaptations we all know from modern pop culture, especially the Disney films. Over the centuries, the rough edges of the original story have been seriously sanded down to fit modern sensibilities. But if we actually look at the original text derived from that 1709 meeting, it is much darker, a lot stranger, and way more complex.
So, the crucial point is understanding what the original story actually entailed. Let's just run through these facts really quickly, because they're wild. First off, the original story isn't even set in Arabia. It's explicitly set in a city in China. Second, there isn't just one big blue genie, there are actually two. The sorcerer gives Aladdin a magic ring that contains a lesser genie to help him outwit the bad guy, while the lamp holds the truly powerful genie. Third, you can completely forget the three-wish rule. There is absolutely no limit on the number of wishes Aladdin can make in the original text. And finally, Aladdin is not just this charming, innocent diamond in the rough. In the original tale, to protect his wife and his newfound wealth, he doesn't just outsmart the sorcerer, he straight up murders him, and then he murders the guy's brother for good measure.
What all of this really tells us is that Hannah Diab wasn't just a passive source. He was an incredibly talented, highly sophisticated author in his own right. As scholar Paulo Lemos Gorda points out, Diab has this unique genius for taking classic storytelling motifs from his homeland and seamlessly weaving them together with his own ambitious, curious, and sometimes totally overwhelming experiences traveling across the Mediterranean. He brought his own complex, lived identity right into the heart of European literature, and in doing so, he created an archetype that has survived for over 3 centuries.
Which leaves us with this really profound question to ponder as we wrap up. Who actually owns a story when it's born from the collision of two totally different cultures? Is it the French translator who physically penned the words and published them for the masses? Is it the Syrian traveler who actually lived the experiences and spoke the narrative aloud? Or does it belong to the cultural collision itself, that magical kind of messy intersection between East and West? I think the core takeaway from our explainer today is that storytelling is rarely just a solitary act. It's a shared inheritance. The true origin of Aladdin proves that the greatest stories we share are born when we sit down, cross our cultural boundaries, and simply listen to one another. Thanks so much for learning with me today. I'll catch you in the next one.